The Black Lives Matter movement exists for a reason. Many people really do not value the lives of black people the same way they would people of their own race. I've previously ranted about the problems with BLM, and I've said that 90% of it is bullshit. But unfortunately, that's true of every social movement, practically, even ones that I've been a part of. They all seem to be taken over by and they become characterized by the most radical, intemperate Puritans within the movement. The true believers are the ones who spend the time and the passion and the energy and the anger on the true cause that they care about. Libertarians and Tea Partiers have legitimate concerns about how much we expect government to solve our problems for us, how many of our decisions really have to be made collectively on election day rather than being left to individuals. I don't think we all show up on election day smarter at running other people's lives than we are at running our own. And I'm glad that someone is asking these questions. But that movement is run by people who really cannot tell the difference between a property tax and a burglary of your home. They really believe that governments cannot create wealth. Only private companies can create wealth. So Trump University can create wealth, but MIT can't. That's the kind of people that characterize that movement. And I pointed out the excesses of the feminist movement, or more particularly, I've ranted and raved about the sheer insanity that seems to possess that movement, and I won't hesitate to do so again. But there is still a need for good people to point out the problems of gender equality, and even in first world America on the left coast, I think the Academy Award should go to Harvey Weinstein for reminding all of us why we still need a feminist movement even in first world countries, even among left-wing PC Hollywood. The pro-life movement has legitimate concerns about the value of human life, developing in the womb and in the terminally ill, but that movement is ruled by people who locally here kept a brain-dead woman alive for months as her body rotted away so they could deliver a baby from her womb, knowing and admitting that it would only live a few days. So when I say that 90% of the Black Lives Matter movement is bullshit, that's not really an indictment of that or any other movement itself, but rather what it has become in the hands of the biased radical loonies. I've managed to live over 60 plus years without ever buying a gun. And yes, I live in Texas, and no, I didn't have a gun. Last year, in the wake of violent crime in my area, I bought one. I took the training, I got a carry permit, and I agonized over whether I could really shoot an intruder. And I did a lot of soul searching about whether I would look at a black intruder differently from a white intruder. Would I hesitate an instant longer if the intruder were white? And if I did hesitate, would that hesitation spell the difference between actually firing a shot and not firing it at all? You can thank the Black Lives Matter movement for making me think long and hard about that. But a year later, and I still don't know the answer to that. Would a black intruder be a greater threat to me? Again, I don't know. But I have to say all of the violent crime and almost all of the other crime in my neighborhood is committed by black people. The Black Lives Matter movement is part of the reason I own a gun. When you see people being beaten while their attackers are screaming, Trayvon Martin, Trayvon Martin, when you hear people engage and see people engaged in violent crime, burning their cities down and their neighborhoods down and saying, go out in the suburbs and do it to them, that's a major motive to arm myself. And I don't want to be part of an arms race in this country. I don't control what other people do owning guns. I can only control myself. In my neighborhood, when a man in the wake of Hurricane Harvey had a long line at the gas station, and he thought it was his turn to pull up to the pump. This white man was brutally attacked and assaulted by a black man who thought he was cutting in line. A young man stoned on drugs smashed through a window in a white family's home in the middle of the night. The man of the house put himself between this intruder and his two small children. His wife ran to get a gun from the gun safe. The young man burst back out through the closed window, further lacerating himself, broke through another window in another home. He wound up dying on a front lawn when a white woman, was walking in the park near our home, and a German Shepherd attacked her dog. She demanded that the two black teenagers in control, or were supposed to be in control of the German Shepherd, give their name and say where they live so that they could be responsible for the vet bill. The two black teenagers responded that she would leave them alone or they would sick the dog on her. The strong arm robbery, the armed robberies, every violent crime reported in the neighborhood on my neighborhood next door application was committed by a black person or black people. The man who drove down the street saying he did not in any way interact with a gang of black youths on the side of the road, and he wound up getting shot in the back of the head, fortunately with just a .22, or he wouldn't be talking. Nothing to provoke them, but just that, just driving by. Other gangs of 20 to 30 black youth reported on our neighborhood next door application and forum, reported by a black man who observes this behavior on a regular basis, he says, and reported at a later time when another gang of youth was jumping fences and causing minor vandalism that one white kid had joined them. So a little multiculturalism there. An intermediate school kid playing basketball with 4 black kids in my neighborhood got beaten up, sent to the hospital, robbed of his bike and his money. Again, all the perpetrators were black. The minor crime in the area, countless cases of black gangs roving the streets at night, breaking into cars, stealing things. Every one of these, all of the video cameras, all of the eyewitnesses reporting they are all black youth. There have been a few crimes that weren't committed by blacks. A couple of Hispanic or white women egging a house on Halloween last year. A package theft by a white or Hispanic woman. One package theft by probably a white or Asian, a light-skinned individual, a male. Race unknown, but definitely light-skinned. Other than that, it seems to be overwhelmingly black people committing the crimes, and this is in a zip code that is 30% black. When I hear feminists say that men need to take responsibility for the sexual harassment, I tend to resent it. Very few men are responsible for the sexual harassment, sexual assaults, etc., that we hear about. And I can only imagine that black people as a class don't want to be told that they need collectively to take responsibility for the crime committed by other black people. When I was a kid, I could go down to the local shopping mall about a mile from my house. One day, as a young teenager, at night, walking across that parking lot, a woman coming toward me walked way around me, keeping a great distance. I felt insulted. She saw nothing except a young teenage kid. I guess it was the first time I ever realized that people perceived me not as a child, but as a teenager. I was a good kid. I wasn't going to rob her. I wasn't going to assault her or steal her packages. I can only imagine if I was black how she would react. I was maybe 5'7", 5'8", and I'm not exaggerating. I was a very skinny kid, maybe 110 pounds, but she saw me as a threat. I realize that racial profiling exists. With this woman, I understood the violent, stupid thieves that she was afraid of because I go to school with them. And I understood why she had no knowledge of me except I was a male and I was a teenager, and that was enough to make her fear me. I had been victimized by the thieves, the thugs, and violent teenagers that I went to school with that she's afraid of. And I got victimized again by them when other people looked at me as potentially being one of those. So when I hear black people talking about being racially profiled, even in my thick, slow mind, I can understand at least a little bit that you get victimized by crime as a black person, then you get victimized again by being profiled as one of those criminals when you're not. I have an outsider's view of what that must be like, and I can only fathom how much worse it is to spend a lifetime being profiled that way. But likewise, you know where it comes from. It comes from actual differences in the rate of crime between men and women, young and old, black and white. Some people cannot bring themselves to admit in comment sections. I hear people on Rebecca Watson's channel or other channels saying, it's just the black people get caught, or it's just the black people are being reported. Well, the victims of black crime are other black people, and they're reporting the crime. And the Justice Department Crime Survey captures data that isn't necessarily reported to the police, and they come up with the same data. Yes, black on black crime and high crime rates among black people are a real thing, just as men committing more crime than women is a real thing, and young committing more crime than old is a real thing. I can tell the difference between how people look at me walking down the street at night versus how they looked at me when I was young. I mean, I don't know which is more insulting, them thinking that I was young, so I must be a criminal, or I'm old, so I must be totally harmless. I worked for a company that had consistently gotten awards for being best among the best employers for women and minorities. I'd much rather rant and rave about the stupid bias in their hiring and promotion than to admit that as soon as I walked out of that building every day, I know that the rest of the world treated me way better than the black people that I knew who worked there. I could hear about racial profiling 100 times. But when a person that you know and you work with and you respect starts talking about how he gets married, I go to his wedding, now he's house hunting. And I've been house hunting many times over the years, more than 5 times, including the time I helped my mom hunt for a house. Every time I went house hunting with the 5 different homes that I've owned over the years, I drive real slow through the neighborhood, seeing what the rest of the neighborhood looks like. And every time I keep thinking, someone is going to think I'm a burglar casing the joint, looking for someone to rob or looking for some unsecured lawnmower to steal. But it's never happened. My friend at work goes out looking for his first house ever as a newlywed. The police do stop him. Now, based upon this information, and only this information, what do you think his hair looks like? Do you think it's long and straight, a little wavy, or little teeny tiny curls? I'm just guessing. I'll bet you're psychic. I bet you know what this guy looks like, based upon nothing but that. I don't know, maybe the little teeny tiny curls reminds policemen of donuts, and we know how attracted they are to donuts. Okay, so much for the humorous relief. Back to the serious stuff. I've been house hunting a few times in my life. I've taken the garbage out thousands of times. It has never been an adventure. I found out from a couple of black coworkers that taking your garbage out in a new development, I've lived in a new development in a middle-class neighborhood, could be an adventure. They carpool together. They're out there while it's still dark. Two black men in a new development, a lot of vacant houses around, a lot of vacant lots. Two black men carrying big garbage bags out to the curb on garbage pickup day, back before they had the big carts. They get stopped by the police. The policeman, I'm sure, can explain to them that, yes, there's a lot of burglaries in new houses. I believe it. I worked for a company that sold a whole house full of draperies for a builder, installed it. A few weeks later, we did it all over again because everything had been stolen out of the house. My home builder here said that this was the last house they put copper piping in because of all the copper piping that gets stolen out of houses. Wiring taken out for less than $100 worth of scrap copper. And I'm sure the cop could explain that to him, but I have a sneaking suspicion that their color has something to do with having to show that they live there when they're taking the garbage out. I understand racial profiling is a real thing. Let me emphasize, this is not the difference between an old white guy driving a Lexus in a three-piece suit and three different black men with their butts hanging out and their underwear showing and they're, wearing gangster-style clothes or something. This happened years ago when we were all within 10 or 15 years of the same age. We worked the same job, same pay scale. We dressed very similarly, had cars and houses that were in the same price range. This was the difference between black and white, nothing else. Some smartass in a comment recently made the comment that, in a comment online, Facebook, I think, said we need a little less black pride, a little less white pride, and a little more Charlie pride, a little more reaching out, trying to understand the other guy and trying to understand where they're coming from. Charlie Pride, for people that don't know it, started his career in, I think, the 70s. He was a black country and western singer. There were a lot of white people that didn't like the idea of a black man singing country and western. I thought they were just racist. But perhaps today they could call it cultural appropriation. How dare he sing our song? The point is, we need to reach out to one another. And the Black Lives Matter, Everyone's Life Matters slogans, we need to understand, exist for a reason. And when Mr. Deity addressed this issue, I was hoping for that kind of even-handed, reaching out, level-headed opportunity to turn the perpetual verbal race war into a real dialogue on race that we're always supposed to have, but it never seems to happen. But I was more than disappointed. I was livid. If you were to get your history through Mr. Deity's little video on All Lives Matter, you would think that the Native Americans hadn't been living in peace and harmony for thousands of years until the evil white people came along and conquered and enslaved them. You would think that slavery never existed in Africa for generations before white people started being their biggest customer, and you'd never know that it continued for generations afterwards. You would never know that the Inca Empire and the Aztec Empire and the Mayan Empire in the Western Hemisphere were imperialistic empires. That's why they call it imperialism. You'd think that they had all just gotten together and voted to join one big collective. I'm waiting for the day that the people in Hawaii demand that they take down the statue of King Kamehameha. He is the guy who conquered the other Hawaiian islands and brought them under his subjugation and his rule. Imagine if you were to treat the white conquerors of the Native Americans the same way in our history book and say that we united these disparate, warring tribes under a single, unified, peaceful country. I think we get called out for that. But for some reason, it's perfectly all right to make a hero out of brown people conquering brown people, white people conquering white people, black people conquering black people. I read years ago that when European nations, England, Great Britain, and France were ending the slave trade, that rulers from Africa begged them not to because slaves and ivory were their only major exports. I don't like people portraying white people as somehow uniquely genocidal, racist lunatics, subjugating people of color throughout the world. I mean, we've done that, as everyone else has done. But when you tell the half-truth, this is what you get. And it adds to the racial resentment of white people against the political left and against minorities. Here's a hint. If you don't like white people being portrayed this way as somehow genocidal, raving lunatics, do not put on a Nazi uniform or a Klan robe and go goose-stepping down the streets of Charlottesville. It doesn't help the image. It doesn't improve matters. And if you don't want black people rioting in the streets, don't perpetuate the idea that somehow this kind of behavior is uniquely or especially endemic within the white race. It isn't. And to the Black Lives Matter people, if you don't want people profiling you as violent criminals, if you don't want them acting like you are genetically programmed to be evil human beings, it helps if you're not engaged in violent criminal riots. If you want to be part of the Black Lives Matter movement and you protest at the beginning of a football game seen by millions and thousands in the stadium, it helps, Marshawn Lynch, if you don't rush onto the field from the sidelines during the game and violently assault a referee. I hope my voice is in a little better shape today. I'll try to wrap this up. I was more than just disappointed in Mr. Deity's rant on all lives matter. I know why people say Black Lives Matter, and I think he knows why people say all lives matter. Disrespecting and spewing venom at the people who use the all lives matter slogan is beneath contempt. He should know better. These people are simply trying to say all lives matter equally. Blue lives matter, etc. White people's lives matter. Yes, your life matters. The term Black Lives Matter to many people sounds like it only Black Lives Matter or just, Black Lives Matter and more than others. That isn't what that movement means, and the All Lives Matter slogan is not meant to disrespect black people any more than Black Lives Matter is meant to disrespect white people. And it would help if skeptics, reasonable people, can step back from their anger at the half of the story that they don't like and acknowledge the half of the story that can make them angry, the half of the truth, the half that says, yes, black people have a crime problem. How much of that is going to be helped by repeating all the ills and all the crime that black people have committed and rubbing it in to them? How much is it going to help to keep ranting and raving about the atrocities committed by white conquerors and the segregation and all the other crimes committed by white people? Human beings can be a bunch of turd-flinging monkeys sometimes, and it helps while we express our anger at the stupidity of other people that we acknowledge that we're also subject to losing our temper. We're also subject to committing our faults. And I really think that Brian Dalton's rant on All Lives Matter only makes matters worse. There are channels out there that specialize in showing nothing more than black on white crime. Yes, that's part of the story. But I think we know that people who do that are not interested in giving an equal and fair assessment of what's going on. They do it to disrespect black people, to condemn black people, and to hurt black people. And the ranting and raving that many people on the left do about all the historical crimes of white people, I find it really hard to believe that they're trying to be fair and objective. And I certainly cannot believe that they're helping matters. So let's try to do better, Brian Dalton. I think you're above the kind of crap that I heard on that particular video. Go watch it yourself and see for yourself. But I think I'm being fair to him, and I don't think he was being fair to people who honestly believe all lives matter is a perfectly reasonable and good slogan that was meant to treat everyone equally. And we shouldn't take offense at that good intention.